Welcome back to Passionate About Music Education. I'm Rachel Hardman, and today I'm going to talk about 3 action points you can put in place into your lesson planning that will help improve your planning and thought process regardless of the situation you are currently working in. Teaching music has always been a bit of a struggle because of the so limited curriculums that exist, the vagueness of the curriculum resources, or the difficulty of the curriculum, making it adapt to a general music classroom where you have, your students who can play instruments and your total beginners. And the other challenge has always been, and will always be for music teachers, having enough equipment and resources. We'd all love to have a grand piano. We'd all love to have a suite of keyboards and computers and tuned percussion, untuned percussion, or if you're a band director, your baritone saxes and all of that kind of stuff. But reality is we have to work with what we've got. So this can make lesson planning and curriculum design quite a challenge for music teachers. And although the key skills you might teach in one school and when you go to another are the same, you're always having to adapt to the resources that you have available. So, how do you create really good lesson plans regardless of what you've got going on in your department? So, action point 1, the first place to start is what musical skill do you want your students to develop, learn, or improve in your lesson or in this particular unit? And again, we are all working in different situations this year. So for instance, I'm teaching no longer in a music room. I'm having to completely redesign my topics to go and work in a maths room with no equipment, no projector, no resources. This has been a real challenge, and I've really had to think about how I'm going to still deliver our school curriculum, but with the limit on resources and a limit on access to instruments. So I keep having to come back to what musical skill do I want to teach? What musical skill is in that curriculum that I can still pull out and still teach to my students, even if it's in a different setting than we would normally have. So normally at this point, I'll have been teaching pitch and rhythm to my year 7s to kind of bridge that gap from coming up from elementary school, fill all those gaps that they might have, because you find some students have learned lots of music and had a music teacher in primary school, and other students have not had anybody. So at this point there would be lots of practical work, lots of tuned percussion, keyboards, recorders, lots of general playing, drum work, rhythm playing, and of course in a maths room this is much more challenging. So the skill for pitch and rhythm and reading notation is still important to me, and it's still the skill that I need them to learn because it's within the curriculum, but now I'm having to switch that up. As it's been coming up to Christmas, I've been using resources linked with Christmas songs, looking at carols and Christmas songs and the differences between the two, and then using the notation of those tunes to be a sort of almost written task. But by blended learning, by flipped learning, I am giving them the practical work to go away and learn Jingle Bells or Away in a Manger for homework, and they've done the theory and the knowledge reading and the understanding of the music notation within the classroom. So they are still getting the key skills of pitch and rhythm in me, not in the way I want to teach it, not the way I like to teach it, but those key skills are still happening. So I sort of start with the end in mind. So action point 2, you've got your end in mind. So it might be music reading or it might be chords. And then you have to simplify it. What 3 to 5 steps do I want the students to take so that by the end of this lesson or by the end of this unit, they can play chords or they can read music? And we as music educators have to really break down, particularly in general music classroom, those simple steps from step 1, step 2 to step 3 to where you want them to be. So you've started with action point 1, planning with the end in mind, and then you're going to go and break it down into stages. So for instance, if it's notation reading and you want them to read the notes, of course you've got to recap, every good boy deserves football and face and all of those basic skills, and keep refreshing all of that, pulling that out of the students. And then, of course, you want to do that practical work. So for me at the moment, I can't teach practical work in my room, but I can point them in the right direction of their own instruments or virtual instruments, downloaded apps, piano apps, so that they can go away and do that skill at home. But of course, I'm not there. So I need to teach them the notation and teach them to read the notation, but also how would you apply that to a keyboard diagram? So Jingle Bells, for instance, is a great tune because it only has 5 notes in it. And it's once they've read the notation, it's right, the next step is how does that map onto a keyboard? Now, again, it's quite written mathematical kind of concepts, but I'm giving them the key skills so that they can go away and do this as a homework task so that they can do the practical work in the safety of their homes where we can't do it in our school environment. Is it ideal? No, of course not. But they are still getting to learn to play music and apply the knowledge, the thought process of here's a B, how do I apply that to a keyboard or a xylophone or a glockenspiel or a recorder, or I've got a violin at home. How do we get them to understand the notation and how it's applied so that they can actually do the fun part, which is the practical work? And the other point is to really consider the resources that you're going to use, what you actually have accessible to you and that you can use within your teaching space. And then looking at varying the tasks so that you have that performance work and some composing work and some listening work and some analysing historical context. It's really important that we teach them those 4 skills because they'll need them if they go up to GCSE or A-level or AP or IB. And we have to teach those skills through our middle school curriculum. So again, when you're doing your lesson plan, you have your key skill that you want them to know, whether it's structure of music or chord progressions or pitch and rhythm. And then you're going to break the tasks down. How can I bring in some composing or performing or listening work or discussing? How am I getting the students to reflect on what they're hearing, what they're seeing, how they're playing, so that they become critical thinkers about music and music education. And my last action point in terms of lesson planning is you've got your key skill, you've thought about the resources and how you're going to break it down into 4 or 5 steps. And now you just need to know is how do you know the children have been successful in your lesson, and how do they know they've been successful? How do they know that they've actually got to the goal of the lesson plan? How do you share that with the students and how do they share it? Do you get students to perform? Do you do feedback sessions? Do you give them feedback sessions? Do you record their work? Do you mark their written work and give it back as a grade? They need to know that they're making progress and they need to feel that success and to know what they've got to do next, because that is how you engage your students into being reflective learners and proactive learners rather than us, just giving them the answer and doing it for them. We really want to encourage that within our music students, that they can think for themselves and push themselves so that they can apply the knowledge you've taught them in the classroom and go and apply it in their band program or their instrumental music lesson or their choral program or their theatre club. Or even if they're just, they're playing keyboard in your room, but they actually play guitar, how do those 2 link so that our lessons are not just silos, that they're all interrelated? Students need to see how everything is connected, particularly music education. So really think about how do your students know that they've achieved, that they've progressed, and how do the students know what they need to do next? Sometimes that can be a really easy question and answer session. So what did you do well today? What did you learn today? What would you do next? How would you improve? What good advice would you give to this group? What have they missed out? What out of the task haven't they achieved? So there's a lot of conversation work going on there. So you are training your students to reflect on where they are, the successes that they've made in your lesson, the knowledge that they have absorbed, and how they're going to progress. So just to recap, in planning lessons, regardless of what situation you're currently working in, what key musical skill do you want your students to know at the end of your lesson or the end of the unit? How do you break that down into a variety of performing, composing, listening, and appraising tasks? What musical skills, instruments do you use to support that? And how do the students know that they're making progress, and how do they feel success and that personal growth? Whatever situation you are currently teaching in, whether you're a new teacher working online or whether you're an experienced teacher like myself and you're now working in a non-specialist room with no equipment, if you keep those core parts of lesson planning in your mind at all times, when the stress gets there and starts to go, I don't know how to teach music in this way, which I felt very much over the last 3 or 4 weeks because it's so different for me to do this. Keeping coming back to what the 3 action points, what skill do I want them to learn, how I'm going to deliver that, how am I going to use all the different parts of music education to do that, and how will they know they've been successful? helps me keep grounded and helps me still continue to share good music education practice. I'm going to continue on this channel to share good advice about music education, planning good lessons, engaging students into the joy of music education, and of course talking about staff well-being and how you can look after yourself so that you have a long and successful career. I'm Rachel Hardman. This is Passionate About Music Education. Hope you've liked today's video. If you have, like and subscribe, and I will see you again on the channel very soon.